Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Intuition Activation Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Rachel, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach, and I'm so excited that you're here to join me for this intuitive development journey. Now, guys, I have a very special episode for you here this week, and this is an episode that I am actually not in. This is an episode that was recorded for another podcast called the Connect Podcast with Andy Hale. Now, Andy Hale is a very good friend of mine and also a client of mine who started this podcast called the Connect Podcast. Based on one of the readings he had, or I believe the very first reading he had with me from his spirit guides that encouraged him to continue to broaden his reach in terms of the inspiration and motivation that he can provide. He actually is an attorney, and he's done a whole bunch of amazing things in his career. And he's even had a couple of documentaries made about some of the work that he has done in terms of helping convicted criminals get out of jail, and a whole bunch of other amazing inspirational things. But his new passion is really about helping spread the word and sharing with people this world of spirituality that they don't necessarily know about, right? This is sort of a new thing for him, being, a little bit older than myself, and him kind of discovering this now as part of his life and feeling such a strong need to share the beautiful messages of spirituality to a greater audience. And so he has this beautiful podcast called the Connect Podcast. And on this podcast, this episode that he has recorded, and it does show up on his podcast as well, but I just had to share it on mine as well, is an interview that he does with one of his good friends. Her name is Jayne Fan. And Jayne he is a friend of his who he referred to me as a client as well. So I have done a reading with her as well. And they spend this whole conversation talking about her really magical, amazing reading that we had with her spirit guides. So, a session that she did with me where we channeled both her spirit guides and her father who passed away. Now, guys, this session that I had with Jayne, I was flying afterwards. I was so excited and just filled up and lit up by just how magical and wonderful this universe is and what it can really mean to understand the trajectory of your soul. And so you're going to hear them talk a lot, or hear them talk about the session that I had with Jayne, but she shares a lot about how the trajectory that her soul has taken, and it's quite a unique one, and how it really led to helping her find her path and purpose, and really gave us a really clear understanding of what her soul is here to do in this life, due to some really interesting circumstances that happened in her last two lives prior to this one. So it's really, really interesting. And there's one part of the interview that they talk about um, a question that Jayne had asked me in our session. And the question she had asked is, she had this guardian angel who came through as well. So we had a spirit guide we were talking to and one of her angels. And she directly asked me to ask her angel, in what instances in my life did the angel prevent me from injury? Because we were talking about how Jayne herself had had a previous life or previously existed in the angelic realm prior to her last two lives here on earth. And that was her job as an angel. Her job as an angel was to look out for a certain number of people and sort of prevent them from prevent them from passing away before their determined time. I guess I should say. And so from precociously dying, I guess you could say. And so then she said, well, do my angels do that for me? Did that happen for me in this life? Have my angels prevented my death in any way? And her angels bring up all of these scenarios where she actually could have gotten really seriously injured or died, and she didn't, and she ended up coming out totally unscathed. And so that comes up in the conversation. And I know when I came out of this reading, I hopped on Instagram that day onto my stories and I said, guys, if there was ever a reason to believe that there are angels protecting you, like that reading was the reading. And it just makes you feel like you are not alone. You are so supported. And that even in times when you are feeling fear about your life, about things that could happen to you or your family or your loved ones or your kids, just to know without a shadow of a doubt that there are these angels who are watching over you and literally stopping you from getting so hurt that you end your life too soon before the predetermined time. It's just so comforting. It's so comforting to know. And I always remind myself of this conversation, this channeling session that I had with Jayne. Anytime that I feel nervous about what's going to happen to my boys, are they going to get hurt? I know my 2.5-year-old's getting pretty adventurous in what he's doing at the park. And in my mom brain, I picture all of the scenarios where he falls off of something and gets so hurt that his life is ruined forever in some way. And I have to remind myself of this conversation, this channeled session that I had with Jayne, where her guides literally listed out all of the ways that she could have been seriously injured, she could have been seriously hurt, and potentially passed away in many of these scenarios. And instead, her angel stepped in at the last second and saved her life many times over. She's a very adventurous woman. So there was a lot of scenarios where this had happened, and you're going to hear them in the podcast, at least a couple of the more significant ones. And so I really wanted to kind of underline that piece of the conversation that comes through. And then the other thing that I really, really loved is, and I do never claim to be a very particularly talented medium in the sense of being able to connect with your loved ones. I claim that it's not my forte. I do claim it's not sort of my favorite thing to do. I'm not as practiced in it. I'm sure that this is one of those things that, like a muscle with all of your intuitive abilities, the more you practice it, the more you strengthen it, the better at it you get. But because spirit guides is really my niche, it's really the thing I enjoy and feel so lit up about. That's sort of where I find my expertise to lie in. But she did ask if we could connect with her father, and I told her no promises, but we can give it a try. And we do end up calling her father in. I do end up getting to connect with him. And the things that came through for her father were so beautiful. And I want to kind of underline just a couple of things about this, which is that, at least in my experience, that sort of the things that came up for her father are kind of the typical trajectory of what happens when you channel a loved one. And so at first, her father kind of reassures her of that he's okay. He almost reminisces or reflects back on the circumstances of his passing, and will let them know sort of what he felt about it. Let his daughter know how he felt about it, and then reassure her that he is okay and that he's happy and safe and at peace on the other side. So that's always kind of how it starts. And then they start to kind of offer, a couple of these pieces of information that will act as complete confirmation that you are talking to your loved one who's from the other side. And so you're going to hear what those couple of pieces of confirmation were for her father. Um, I think one of them being a yellow flower. And there was a couple of other things. And these are things that only they would, between the two of them, these were conversations that only they would have had, or she would have known about him, to really confirm, like, yes, this is your father. And me being a medium who'd never met her or her father, being able to say those things kind of offers that confirmation. So that I find is really beautiful, to kind of know that, yes, there is sometimes a possibility to prove it. And that, there really is another realm, there really is another side, and our loved ones never really leave us. And I think that this point just is so gorgeous because, when it comes to channeling spirit guides, I mean, who's to say that, and I know this is strange coming from me, but who's really to say that what I'm channeling and what's coming through is not completely made up in my head, right? I mean, there's nobody out there who can tell me out a shadow of a doubt that what I'm seeing is real. There's almost no way to really prove it, and to offer, uh, tangible advice that it could happen. And of course, with Jayne herself being a lawyer, you know, she came into this reading quite skeptical. And so it was so nice for her to also receive kind of this really, you know, big piece of proof that like there's no way that you can doubt that this is real. And so that was really beautiful for me as well to hear, listening back that, you know, that these things, oftentimes we do doubt and we do wonder, even myself, sometimes I go, did I just make all of that up? And sometimes I even need the reassurance of the client to kind of go, yeah, no, that is true. That's exactly what's going on in my life, or, whatever it is. And so to hear also from a loved one to offer sort of that piece of confirmation for his family that, it's really me on the other side is really beautiful. And the other thing that will sort of happen in when we connect with a loved one that she mentions is that then once they kind of make sure that it's them, then they'll kind of just start sharing like these beautiful memories that they have. They kind of start reflecting on their life and sharing their memories with you. And so she describes that happening as well, him wanting to start reflecting on his life and sharing memories. So guys, this is a really beautiful conversation. When I listened back to it, I got chills so many times, and it was just so beautiful and reassuring to really just feel comforted about you really do have so much support, right? It feels invisible, and sometimes it feels like we can't access these guides and these angels who are around us all the time. But guys, they are there. They are there, and they're helping us, and they're with us every single step of the way. They're rooting for us through many, many lifetimes and always helping us, achieve the things we're here to achieve, learn the lessons we're meant to have, achieve enlightenment and move forward. And so it's just so beautiful to receive confirmation that they're out there. And I really hope this conversation is as warming and beautiful of a message for you as it was for me. And so without further ado, I am so excited to introduce to you Andy Hale and Jayne Fan on the Connect podcast. And definitely, I'm going to put the link in there in that podcast in the show notes. Definitely be sure to go and check it out. Andy is so phenomenal, and he has so many inspirational messages to share. So definitely go and give that a look, or a listen rather. And otherwise, I can't wait for you to listen to this conversation between Jayne and Andy about the session that Jayne and I had channeling her spirit guides.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Connect. I'm your host, Andy Hale. I have been so looking forward to this episode today, because what I'm going to talk about, to me, was really kind of blew me away, and I want to share this story. So I'm here with Jayne Fan. Jayne, good to see you.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So as a
And
little
seeing
context, a little context, Jayne and I worked together 30 years ago. Okay. Can't believe that. We must have been little babies back then, but we've stayed in touch.
we were 5.
Yeah. We've remained good friends. And I just, as listeners to this podcast know, I just discovered the concept of a spiritual medium, last year when I met Jessica Rachel. I've had her on this show, I think 3 episodes, interviewing her, telling her story. And I've been mentioning to friends and family, like, you got to check out Jessica Rachel. This is life-changing. So I mentioned it to Jayne. To Jayne's credit, she was interested and decided to book a session. And we're here to talk about that. So I want to save for a minute the way your session ended, but let's start out with a little background.
Okay.
Before you did this session with Jessica Rachel, the spiritual medium, did you consider yourself a spiritual person?
I did. And actually, funny enough, she kind of asked me something similar, whether I had any experience with a medium. And no, I definitely consider myself a spiritual person, but more, I would say, in sort of like teachings of Buddha, Zen Buddhism, a lot of more the Asian religions. So because also that the concept of ghosts and spirits, and your ancestral spirits still around, that's very very Asian, I would say, like very strong in the Asian world. So even when you're growing up, it's like oh, that's always a little bit, kind of like a little bit of a nice shadow, watching what you're doing and stuff. But I did have and I read a lot. I would, but more like as a self-help guide, I would say. And I am a Christian, and so the belief in God and the concept of another spiritual realm, that has kind of ebbed and flowed depending on what chapter I was in my life. But yeah, I would call myself a spiritual person. I would also call myself a healthy cynic
Okay.
in terms of
Yeah, no, you're a good combination. And I personally would describe myself before meeting Jessica Rachel as more like, I wouldn't say necessarily spiritual, but definitely intuitive. Definitely believe, kind of following your gut and, intuition and things like that. And I guess spiritual to a little bit, but I didn't really have much experience with it. So had you ever heard of, before meeting Jessica Rachel, the concept of a spiritual medium, meaning that you are basically, you have a spirit guide assigned to you that you can tap into, who can kind of guide you through your life to make sure you're living kind of your most aligned, purposeful life. Had you heard about that?
No, I did not. I was more, yeah, I didn't, um, but I don't know if this is a new thing, but, so I would say, yeah, no, I hadn't heard about it. You always hear about angels, and I did have some experiences where I thought, okay, somebody is there, something is there, something has happened. I'm pretty sure that, we're not alone, that they are interacting with us in different circumstances, somebody, but it was very an amorphous concept to me. I didn't hear that there were these, I mean, I knew that there were, the old, like gypsies seances. So about that. But no, I was not aware that there was actually someone assigned to me.
So this is so fascinating to me because your session, kind of like unlike my sessions have been with Jessica, been more, my spirit guide's given me a lot of helpful advice and guidance. I think has kind of pegged me as a certain way, but I didn't really get any huge aha kind of moments, which you did, which we're going to talk about. So let's walk through it a little bit. When you do your session, Jessica first kind of gets you grounded, you tap into your spirit guide, and then she then connects with your spirit guide. Tell me how she described what she saw as your spirit guide and what you learned.
Oh yeah, it was so I went into this very neutral. I went into it first of all because I completely trust you, Andy. I mean, you're
Well,
like
thank you.
highly credible.
Thank you.
And I was curious, I thought I've never been to for myself, a medium. So although I have contacted a pet medium, and I've had interactions with a pet medium before, and that was really incredible. But that was years ago. And so when she first said, she just kind of closes her eyes, and then she kind of has this little smile all of a sudden, and she said, oh, she goes, well, I have to tell you, two guides have appeared. I'm calling, so she calls them, calls the person, and she said two of them have appeared, and oh, they're very different looking. So she describes one as this incredibly, and she used the term fiery, F-I-E-R-Y, fiery, like
Oh,
fury,
Fury. Oh,
fiery, like
yeah.
and really kind of, she goes, she's very strong, like very muscular, almost kind of like male-like in her physical form that she sees. And she has this shocking orange red hair that's flowing. And she's got these big old bracelets that are, the way she described me made me think of, the old Wonder Woman, the bracelets.
Linda Carter. Yeah.
Linda Carter, Wonder Woman, for those of you
Right.
who saw her then. And giant bracelets on. And then, and she said she was holding like a big old, not a sword, but kind of like a pole, like a big old, like a saber almost.
Okay.
And she was like kind of like flowing, and but very, very like very almost, she would say almost like a masculine energy, but definitely a female. So I don't know what you call that these days, but anyway, that's how she described it. And then she said, oh, and your second one, she goes, this is highly unusual that two have appeared. It turns out you have two spirit guides, but one is more, she looks more, the other one looks more like what you would expect or what you would think an angel looks like.
Wow.
All in white. Her hair is kind of black and sort of has, she's got it cropped across her face and very short and just straight. And she has a quiet energy. And so that's how she described them. She said it was very
What did you
unusual.
think of that? Just getting those two descriptions.
Well, when she first
You ready
talked,
to just like end the session? Like, okay, this is crazy. I just
no, and maybe it's just I'm listening, I'm just listening to her, and I had no idea what anybody would look like, or how I had really no idea how the session would go.
yeah.
And so I kind of, when she talked about this like fiery man like guide, it and she said very kind of like this very aggressive um vibe. It kind of reminded me of myself at
I was
times.
gonna say this kind of sounds like you kind of to me are a Wonder Woman kind of person.
Well, yeah, no, I get really hyped up, like this must be, this wrong must be righted kind of thing. I get
Yeah.
very righteous, or I used to. I kind of, and then when she talked about this other really mellow guide, it made me think of, okay, that's kind of what I've been striving for, a lot more just kind of, so I didn't, they weren't somebody, they weren't exactly how I pictured myself. So it wasn't like, aha, that's me.
Yeah, and
But
it's not your guides don't mirror you or your personality.
yeah.
They get the way I understand it from Jessica, they get chosen, they just basically choose the person for whatever reason. There may or may not be a similarity to who you are. In your case, it was. Um, so what was the significance of the angel? Like what did she say about the angel guide relating to you?
Yeah, she did not really say one or the other. Like she didn't, because at times I would say, well, who is saying that? Like which one of them is saying something? And she would say, well, they're both speaking. They're both saying it. So we didn't really distinguish, but um, and she did kind of only in the beginning when she introduced them, distinguish the angel guide as more like an angel as opposed to a spiritual guide. So I don't know what the distinction was, and we didn't really take it further.
Did she say something when you and I talked something about your spirit, like you being an angel? Like what was that discussion?
Yeah, yeah. So originally, so going back a little bit, she had said, and asking me in the introduction, so what is the purpose of this call? Like, what is it that you want to get out of this call? And I said, my question is really, well, one, I wanted to speak to my dad if possible, although she said that wasn't quite her, forte. But really, it's sort of like, why are we all here? That was my question. What is the purpose of our little lives that, we spend so much effort in living, and the ups and downs of life? And when, there's that eventuality and that certainty that we will all die. So why are we here? Like, what is our purpose? And so
Good
if some,
question. Very, very deep question. Yeah.
yeah, and I've always asked this question, and, especially when you're, if you're a professional and you're working hard, et cetera, at some point you're just like, what is all this for? Why am I
Yeah.
doing
Hey,
this?
good job. You were a great lawyer. Okay. You died. Good job.
Yeah.
Like that's it?
lot of money, you supported your family, and that's nice. And you're like, wait a minute, there's a lot of accumulated
What did she
knowledge
say
and yeah.
when you said that was your question? How did she handle that?
She said, okay. She goes, yeah. She goes, I think your guys can help you with that. So, and she, and she did say that's such a fundamental question for all of us. It's really, I think, why are we here?
Yeah,
Why?
no,
How,
that's amazing. Did your guides have an answer?
Well, she did. So she said, so she, Jessica listened for a while,
And by
and
the
then
way,
she,
let me pause. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're giving the audience a very condensed version because these sessions are 90 minutes, so we're kind of condensing it.
mine wound up to be 2 hours. It
Oh,
went, I mean, there were tiny little breaks here and there,
yeah.
but
So I'm sorry. So when you asked the question, what did Jessica channel from your guides?
right. So she said, "Oh, well, they want you to know," and it was very funny because when she would say these things, and right before she would say, she'd have a little smile because I kept my eyes open watching her for
Yeah, yeah, me too.
some session because I kind of wanted to see like what's
Right.
happening.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh," she goes, "Well, actually, you were already an angel." Yeah. So she said, you're not just an old soul. You've had thousands of lives before, and you've gone through those lives, and you've actually learned what you needed to learn in each of those lives. And you had already progressed to being an angel.
Wow.
So she goes, you weren't really even, she goes, you just kind of like hit it and went there. And she said, so then she described, I said, so what was it like? And so she described it. She said, so um, in this realm, in this angel realm, I'm not even sure that's the right term, but that everybody does have a job. So that's good to know. Like,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not just floating around, but everyone has a task, a job. And she said, your task was to kind of watch over certain people that you got to choose who you watched over. And in fact, you became a spirit guide for some of those people. And she said, so that was sort of your job. And you, she goes, you actually were watching over somebody who was a close friend of yours. That's her soul was, but she was in another form, another
Yeah.
person in that period. So so you did this for a while, and she made the distinction between spiritual realm time and earth time. So, a blink of an eye in spiritual realm time could be hundreds of years, 100 years in human time, right? So it goes by very, very fast. So, and so she said, and then she started to laugh as she's listening, and she goes, and then she goes, I don't know how to say this, but she goes, you got bored. You got bored with your job. And you started a conversation where you said, wait a minute, these humans, they're kind of so fragile, they're constantly getting themselves into things. But I feel, I guess I, as an angel, felt that humans could be more self-sufficient, that they didn't need the spiritual guides or angels to watch over them, to kind of make adjustments. Oh, don't fall into that hole. Watch out for that bus, think, and to give them suggestions and things. And that, and she said exactly, she goes, you felt that you were being a security guard, just watching over them, and you wanted to do something. So you elected to come back down in human form so that you could prove your theory, or your, I guess, yeah, your belief that humans could be strong on their own, and that they didn't need spirit guide. They didn't need
Okay.
any kind of spirituality in their lives
Okay.
to function as well as they function now. And so I'm like, whoa. And I said, when was this? She goes, so this was 2 lives ago. So that you came back down. So you had your most recent previous life was when you came down. And
Wow.
then so I'm like, so what did I do there? And she said, well, the spirit guide said, I became like a professional athlete. And she
Look at
said,
you, angel, professional athlete. Wow.
she said it was in track and field, which I'm terrible at. I'm a terrible runner. And I actually tried to do track and field when I was in high school in this lifetime, and I failed miserably. I was terrible. I have short legs. And but she said and then she goes, what are one of those? So she said, I was a pole vaulter. She goes, what is it? And then she said, oh, she goes, I see a big, big pole. And she goes, I was a pole vaulter. And she goes, you purposely, like, you were super strong and you trained and you won all these competitions and you became very, very successful in that lifetime. And all you did was train, 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 and win competitions and train. And she said, and so I'm listening to the story and I'm thinking, that's interesting. Okay. I don't necessarily identify, doesn't like, the whole working endlessly until, to do and exclude everything else from your life. That sounded very familiar to me, because that's kind of what I've been doing previously as a lawyer, but in this lifetime. But so that kind of resonated with me, that sort of workout ethic. And then she said, and then it was just like kind of like, so I'm listening to the story, and then also she said, yeah, and then you eventually retired, but because you had nothing else in your life and you had sort of eschewed, like, subconsciously spirituality, because you fell into a deep, deep depression. And then you ended your life.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
What?
Wow.
Yeah. And then she said, so you never, so she said, you didn't learn what you needed to learn in that lifetime. And so she goes, and also when you end your life, when you suicide, you automatically come back. You don't go anywhere. You just come right back.
Oh,
You don't
wow.
have, right. So you don't, like, so I don't know what the procedure is for regular, whether you get to choose or you go up for a while, or I don't know, but she said you automatically come back. And so, and I said, so this lifetime is the continuation of the last lifetime. Is that right? And she said, yes.
So your previous life was this track star?
I
That
guess,
died by
yes.
suicide?
Yes. So
What?
I haven't Googled.
Yeah, we got to find this person.
And she said it was a female. I was in female form. So
What,
yeah, pole vaulter, a high pole vaulter.
what,
Yeah.
what did, so what did your angel spirit learn about the kind of thesis that, humans don't really need spirit guides? Did you prove it or disprove it?
Well, I think I pretty much disproved it. If I'm using my logic right now, that I certainly didn't prove my case, because I became depressed, and so whether, and it might not be that it's much more, I guess, much more general in terms of, that maybe the spirit guides are not just there to tell you what to do, but they're there as, that, I don't know, I have to believe on some level, you kind of feel them, so you don't feel so alone. Like, and especially, and this was like sort of one of my ahas when I was listening to all of this is, and at the end of our session, I really felt it is, oh my God, I am not alone. That whole, I feel like there is, especially these days, where we can become so disconnected, because of all the technology. We're becoming more and more disconnected from ourselves, even that, you know, feeling like there's nothing around to protect you, nothing to believe in. I think it's a very, very dark place. Like this, like, so why shouldn't I do bad things? And yeah, so I don't know. Now I've forgotten the question.
Well, so I want to, I want to kind of continue with some of the things I know that, we talked about. How did it come up? How did it come up in your session about you basically kind of being saved a couple times? If you can give those examples, like how did that come up and tell those
Oh my
stories?
gosh, yes, yes. So how did that come up? So that come up, okay, on the tails of a question I asked, which actually was pretty dramatic, and uh, where I had first asked, so if there is if the spirit guides, why I always felt that things happen. I always felt that I was very lucky, that I was just lucky that things happened in a positive way for me. And then I had this very bad incident at work where I was falsely accused of something. And that kind of completely changed my life, my professional life. And I said to her, and I didn't say what it was, I just kind of alluded to it. And I said, why would that have happened? And I felt the rug had been pulled out from under me, and that, all of my allies and my friends and my colleagues, trusted colleagues, all sort of turned their back on me because they were afraid. And I felt really alone. And I said, and this was in the context of, there have been periods in my life where, as she was talking about my prior life as an athlete and falling into depression, that really resonated with what had been recently happening in my own life in the last, I would say, 10 years.
Mhm.
And so, I asked about that. I'm like, so what are the parallels? What lessons am I meant to learn? And then I said, so that just seems really unfair. Like, it's not unfair. Why weren't my spirit guides there to, tell me? And she said, well, they're saying that you kind of knew it was coming. So it was like a tough love kind of
Hmm.
approach. And I was like, what? And they said, no, the signs were all there. They're saying during that period of time when that was starting to happen, she goes, you were sick all the time. So she has no idea what period this was, Jessica, no idea where this happened. And she goes, they're saying you were sick, and you could mark your calendar by how often you got sick over this period of time. So you knew, your body was telling you that whatever course you were on, you needed to course correct. And
Wow.
yeah,
So like this incident happened because you needed to shift gears and change lanes
I
and
needed to get out of that job. And that had always, I really wasn't very happy at this job
had you
for a
been
long
physically
time
sick?
before that. I had, and the thing is, she was spot on. I had been really sick,
Hmm.
like all of a sudden, like I'd be sick for 2 weeks, and then I'd kind of get back to work, and all of a sudden, and something else would happen. I'd get sick again, and I was constantly sick. And she pointed that out. And it wasn't, it wasn't like, oh, poor you, it was like, no, you knew it, you should have done it. You had all the signs, you knew, you were
Wow.
thinking about it. And it really was a big parallel to the fact that, I was not being true to my self. I was not following, I hated this job. I hated everything about it, and I should have left. And then ultimately, and I did, and I said to her, and I felt like all of a sudden, like this exact event, like somebody had intervened
Yeah.
and yanked the carpet out. And I said, and at the
Like
time
it's
I
time to go. It's time to
right, like
go.
and other than the physical person who actually did that, I felt like, wait a minute, my life hadn't been like this. And it really felt like something else, a higher power, had intervened and said, okay, that's enough. We're
Wow.
tired of waiting for you to figure
So
this out.
interesting.
Today.
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Did she also talk about times when like you kind of were saved, like the bus story?
Yes. So that's kind of when, and she actually confirmed, she said, yes, your spirit guide did have a hand in this, what you consider back then, this really negative thing that happened to you, because they did have a hand in that. They're saying they did. And then that's all she would say. And then she said, and I said, well, I did get sick a lot and I had a lot of, and she goes, and then she said, so then she goes, oh, wait, so they're saying, she said, so horseback riding. She goes, horses. She just like shouts out horses out of the blue. And I said, yeah. She goes, did you have a riding accident? And I said, actually, I did.
Wow.
Yeah, 3 years
Wow.
ago, I fell off a horse. I was riding during a jump, and I had acute fractures in 3 of my vertebrae.
Wow.
So, and I said, and they said, yeah, they prevented that. They're saying that that could have been a lot worse, and they prevented that from becoming worse, where you're paralyzed. And then she said, and she goes, and was there another incident? So she starts saying, they're saying this, and she starts saying, was there another incident with a truck? And I was like, whoa. I'm like, she goes, because she goes, she said, they help you along the way, and they're there to kind of adjust things or warn you. And if you're not listening to their warning, that was the whole overarching theme, was that if you're not, they're sending you messages all the time, if you through like your body, maybe they're talking to you. If you're not listening to those, eventually something will happen. And that's kind of what happened with this work incident. But so then she started saying, and I said, well, what other times, right? And then she said, this truck. And I said, she goes, were you like almost hit by a truck? And I was blown away.
This is crazy. This is crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I said, actually, I was. I said, this is like, they're over 30 years ago. I was working in New York City. I was early in the morning, 7 a.m., walking to work in Midtown. And there was nobody else around. It was so early. And I remember I was crossing 3rd. And I could see the light, and I was waiting at the crosswalk for my light to change. On the right side of me, you could see the lights for the traffic, for the cars, and there was a protected left-hand turn signal. That changed to red. I stepped my crosswalk changed to green. I step off the crosswalk, step onto the crosswalk. I start walking. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice. It was like as loud as you and I talking, inside, right next to my ear. Like, and I remember this was my left ear. It was so saying, "Oh my God, watch out for the truck." And when I heard that, I just immediately, like, instinctively stopped, reflexively stopped. And as I stopped, all of a sudden I felt and saw the side mirror of this giant Mack truck graze my nose.
Wow. Oh my God.
And it had run the left turn light, the red light, and it was practically on like 2 wheels.
Wow.
And had I not stopped, I definitely would have been run over.
It's unbelievable.
And it was unbelievable. And so, and it just kept going. Like it actually ran into another red light and just stopped. But
at the time, you didn't really know what to make of that voice you heard.
Well, the thing is, I looked around to thank whoever it was, and there was no one around me. The streets were empty. And other than me in the truck, and then maybe a couple of other cars, but there was nobody behind me, nobody around me. And but I heard that as clear as day.
And so
So
she brought up the
she brought
horseback
that
riding
up.
accident. She brought up the truck incident. Two
Yes,
examples where your spirit guide or guardian
yes,
angel protected.
yes, yes. And then she said there have been others. They could list them. And
Wow.
then, and then, I don't know, she didn't say this, but maybe that's why I have two.
Well, that's amazing. Now, we saved the best part for last because this has all just been the appetizer. Um, I want to get into like the main part now, which blew
Mm,
me away. Um, and you actually shared this video with me. So I've watched it, I've seen it, and it's incredibly powerful. Um, let's set up, how did it come up at the, you said at the start of this podcast, you did want to channel your dad. And I know Jessica has said, like you said here, that's not really her forte. She tries it. Sometimes she can do it. Sometimes she can't. She admits it's not her. She's much better at channeling spirit guides. How did this whole thing come up about your dad at the end of the session? Did you just raise it again?
no, because we specifically said we wanted to save some time for that, for her to
Okay.
attend. And so then so, we kind of, she also gave me my message, in terms of what my purpose is. And then
Do you want to share that before we get into your dad part? Or
yeah, well, it's interesting because it's kind of not, well, yeah, I'll just share it. I was gonna say, it's not something I would have expected. And so, but in keeping with that, that's why I'm doing this podcast. Like, I'm not very comfortable. So her message was, or my spirit guide's message was really that, that as an angel, and it was really cute the way she said it. She goes, as an angel, if you're going ultimately, you're going to leave this world again, and as an angel, you want to leave something behind. You kind of want to make it better, and so they see my purpose as really helping spread the word, like share my experiences,
yeah.
share trials and tribulations, but also, like, she recommended 3 books. The guides recommended 3 books too, which Jessica didn't even know, and had to kind of like piece together the color of the book cover, etc. Yeah, and in fact, I brought them just now. And then she was like, she goes, I've heard of one book, but I don't know these other books, but they want you to read those
Do
books.
you want to share the titles?
Yeah. So, so one of them is, I think this is the one I think no, she didn't remember. She didn't know this. Louise Hay's, You Can Heal Your Life,
Okay.
which I've not started. The other one, which is very interesting because I have such mixed reactions to this as I'm reading this, is Conversations with God, book 1,
Okay.
by Neil Donald Walsh.
Okay.
And then the other one, which I think probably a lot of people know about it because it says it's a New York Times bestseller, Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty.
So your spirit guide suggested you read those books.
Yeah. Like, I have assignments. I have an assignment.
Yeah, you got a homework
Yeah.
assignment that your path and purpose was to spread the word.
To spread the word, to work through, but not spread the word like, like an evangelist or anything like that, but actually just to work on myself through the process, share, like reading the books, working on the exercises, trying out, different ways of thinking, and then sharing what I thought about it. And
Okay.
she said, you will build a following. And I just kind of like, I'm not on social media or anything.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh
So
no, I don't
this is
follow.
your first step out into, like, that's why you're doing this podcast then, right? You're kind of like, you're putting your toe in the water.
Yeah, I think my Facebook or X account is, under my dog's name or something. Like, I have like literally 0 social media presence, and I
Well,
never really
we're gonna have a follow-up to this down the road. So at the end of the session, when she decides to channel your father, who passed how long ago?
He passed just a little over a year ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
so fairly
So,
recent.
a year and 3 months. Yeah.
So tell me, like, how does she go about doing that? Tell me how that worked.
So, yeah, so I told her, so she asked me to say his name. She goes, so just, what is his name? And then I gave both his Chinese name and his English name. And I said, I don't know, do you need to pronounce it in the Chinese way? And she said, no, just you saying it is enough.
Hmm.
So then we wait a little bit, and then all of a sudden she goes, oh, I think does he have sort of roundish glasses? And he does. It's more like octagonal, roundish. It's not exactly round. I said yes, and she said, and does he have kind of a jovial personality? And I said, well, caustically jovial, I would say.
Mhm.
And she said, well, once they go into that realm, their personality soften. So, but he definitely had a very, I could see, I picture him as, generally somebody with a great sense of humor. And so she said, and he has a very particular name. His name is Chun Fan or Fan Chong. So it's very, it's more unique because it's more Asia based. But so she then said, okay, I see him. And she said, okay, yes, it's definitely him. So
Okay.
then he appears to
Wow,
her.
this is exciting. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow. And so he goes, so she said, okay, so what is it that you want him? What is it that you want to know? Or, let's start the conversation. And so I said, well, I just really want to know how he is, how he's doing, because he didn't leave under the best of circumstances. And I'm worried. One, I wanted to make sure he made it out, right? And
Mhm.
so she said, okay. So she said, yes. And then she starts saying that what he remembers. Okay. So so he said, he's doing great. So reassuring. So he said a lot of reassuring things, that he's doing great. Um, he started to, and then she said he's talking about a lot of his memories of at the hospital, that he said he didn't like. He goes, he's holding his throat, and I'm feeling like my throat like is really tightening up. And I said, well, he was fully intubated
Mm.
at the time. He was in ICU, and ultimately, we had to take him off the machines, and that's when he ultimately left. But so that was like, I was like, oh,
Was
that's
she
interesting.
saying, was she saying that he didn't like that?
He didn't like that. Like, that was the big part that he didn't like. And then he was very confused about being in the hospital. And he said, and she said, and he knows that you were talking to him and he was talking to you while at the hospital.
Mm.
And that all is very true, because, and I don't think I even told you, I mentioned this to you, because I was talking to him, like, because I could feel his presence. And it showed that there were periods, his functions, there were periods of time when, in the beginning, when he was in ICU, that they could see that he was still partially functioning on his own. And
Mhm.
I could actually hear his voice
Wow.
talking to me, and he was very confused,
Mm.
like not understanding what was happening.
Yeah.
And so I kept trying to talk him through the process. We'd been waiting for test results, brain scans to come back to see what impact his brain was in, what impact the mini stroke had. So it was all very, like, during that whole process, I felt very close to him.
Mhm.
Uh, and I would keep him updated on his
Yeah.
progress. I mean, and it would just be me off in a corner, and I would just have a conversation with him in my mind, and he would talk back. And when we finally had to release him, he didn't know what was happening. So that was like very distressing to me,
Mhm.
because when we ultimately left the hospital, I remember, I was in the car, and all of a sudden I heard his voice say, May, that's what he called me. Where am I?
Wow.
Like, it's dark here. Where am I? And I was like, oh my
Oh
God.
my
Like,
goodness.
completely freaking
Wow.
out, thinking my father is like stuck somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is, and I
I
thought,
could see
oh,
why you wanted to talk to him to make sure he's
yeah,
okay. Yeah.
yes, I desperately wanted to talk to him
Yeah.
because I heard his voice and it woke me up from, I was like kind of like drifting off in the car. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this must be where they've taken his body to, I don't know, the freezing. It sounds terrible, to somewhere,
Yeah.
and it's dark. And he said, I'm in the dark. And I thought, okay, and I actually said to him, like, Dad, just go home, go home, go home, go home. Just find the house and go home. And because we were driving there and I was saying, we're going to be there. And so when I went to his house, when I walked in, there was this like amazing sunlight that was
Mm.
streaming through the windows.
Wow.
And I just had this huge, like, unexplainable sense of relief.
Yeah.
Knew that he had gotten out of wherever he was and he was actually there. His spirit was there. He was home and he was at peace. But then I didn't know what happened. Like the next day that it sort of,
Yeah.
that feeling went away. And so, yeah, I did really want to know what he was. And so he said that he's fine now. That, yeah, it was very confusing. He didn't know what was happening at the
Does
hospital.
he understand it now?
He understands it now, now that he's there. And also he said, and then she said, all of a sudden he's showing me like a golf club. Did your dad play golf? And I said, no, he doesn't play golf. And she goes, oh, wait. She goes, no, it's like a shovel. It looks like a shovel. And I said, well, he's a gardener. And she goes, well, this is very interesting. He's showing me the image from when he's in his grave.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, that's kind of morbid. And she goes, and all of a sudden she shouts out, yellow flower.
He shouts out yellow flower.
Like just out of the blue, yellow flower. And I was
Might
like,
have significance to
he's
you.
saying yellow flower. And he was like, she goes, I've got an image of a yellow big flower. And I just started to I had this huge reaction and I just said melted butter, because my dad was a huge tall bearded iris hybridizer. That was his passion, his life. That's what he
Explain
did
what that is.
even before retired. So it is creating new varieties of tall bearded irises from existing varieties. And so he would pollinate them, and he'd match a mom and a dad. And they're registered. So go to ais.com or .org website. And these flowers are amazing. And it's crazy that anyone even grows them, because they only bloom generally once a year. They are perennials, but they only bloom for 2 weeks, once a year, generally in May, depending on where you are. And they never, you can't sell them commercially because you can't speed that up. So rare, most people don't see them because you can't buy them in Trader Joe's or
So did he, is this the
flower
one that he did? Was it well known?
Yes. So he's very famous in that world, and he's got a whole bunch of registered tall bearded irises that he himself created. So anybody can look up, type in his name, CHUN, Fan, FAN, and look up tall bearded irises, and you'll see all of his registered.
What do they look like?
They look like a cross. Have you ever seen those? They call them iris roses or rose irises. I can't remember which one goes first. They're like big bulbed, and they're not like the Japanese or Siberian irises that you see commercially grown. They're very lush. They're big, big. They look like I don't know. They look like a hand bowl with little falls that go underneath. I'll send you.
And these are yellow.
Well, his champion one and his favorite one, and the one that he's most well known for, is a yellow crossbreed.
That's crazy for her to say yellow flower.
Yellow flower.
And he's got this champion crossbreed iris hybrid.
Yes. And so all of a sudden she said, did you have, so he is telling you that he knows you, so it's like, to me, I interpret that as he's signaling that, okay, he's now telling me something that is very significant to him and to me, and I would know that. So all this other stuff, sometimes you're like, oh, well, that's nice. Is it provable? Is it verifiable?
Yeah.
No. So tell me something that only he and I would know. Like, what's our secret password kind of thing. And I didn't
Right.
ask, but so she said it, and she said, he wants you to know that he really appreciated all the flowers, first of all. And I said, and in my mind, I'm like, that's the signal, because he wouldn't, if he mentioned any other color, it would be like, okay, yes, he's breeded a lot of them before. We had a lot of flowers, but yellow flower was super significant. And it's sort of like something so personal that you would know, right? So that was one thing he said. And that made me then, it was like, okay, one thing has like been confirmed. Like, there's something now, more things that she's saying about him that somebody else, that wouldn't be significant normally to anybody else, right? So there's that. And then she said, and then so then, because we didn't have that much time left and we had already gone over, so she said, well, is there anything else? Because he's reminiscing, he's going through his memories right now, and he can share memories with you. And I said, no, Dad, I just want to, I want to know that you're okay and that we'll be seeing you soon. And he's like, well, not so soon, because you have 30 to 40 more years left to do
Wow.
your work. And I'm like, oh
That's
my
good to
God.
know.
I don't know
Wow.
about that savings left. But then, so then all of a sudden, so then she said, okay, so we're going to kind of wrap it up. She goes, oh, wait. And then she yells out, Lucy. And I stop. And because I was ready for like this whole thing to be, okay, that's the session.
Yeah.
And she goes, he is yelling out Lucy. He wants you to know Lucy is there with him.
Who is Lucy?
Lucy is my beloved dog,
Oh my gosh.
who passed away, I
Wow.
would say, 7 years ago, under really, really traumatic circumstances. And like, she literally died in my arms. I
Oh my
felt
God.
her heart stop.
What?
And
Oh my gosh.
and
So what?
he knew that I love Lucy above all else. And he said, and I always wondered, and I had a thing with Lucy where at her death, some people might think it's morbid. I took a photo of Lucy just because because she seemed so at peace. It was quite horrible. She was very sick, and she seemed so at peace when she left. And on the photo, there is a pink aura around her. And first, when I took the picture, I thought, okay, something's wrong with my camera. So I started taking pictures around in the room, and there was nothing different. And I took a photo again of her, and there was the pink. And in that moment, or that for the rest of that evening, I felt just this pure love, this warm glow of love emanating in the room. And so when he said that, and I don't think I've ever shared that with him while he was alive, but he knew, like, Lucy, and he had
Well,
met Lucy.
let's pause here. I mean, the two huge blow me away moments are, she mentions your dad, she mentions yellow flower, which has got this huge significance to your dad and you. And then she mentions Lucy, that he's here with Lucy. I mean, when you told me this just blew me away.
Yeah, I immediately started crying when
Yeah.
she said he's
Yeah.
saying, yeah.
Your session was really emotional. It just, having done the session and being told the things you were told about, an angel and your past lives and, your issue at work and how it was meant to be, and channeling your dad. What kind of impact has this had on your life and your outlook on life?
It has been profoundly comforting. Like outwardly, I don't think anything's really changed, although I am doing my homework, reading more. But there's a sense of peace, and there's a sense of, okay, this feels right, because we would not have been put here just to have no purpose. Like everything on
Yeah.
this earth has a purpose, right? And everything is connected. We're all connected. And to have this, like, I feel like it's been verified now.
Yeah.
It's been verified.
Yeah.
Like all of these things that she said, and I don't, we didn't touch on every single thing she said, but it was, or that was communicated. But it's just like, okay, one, I am a healthy skeptic. I mean, we're both lawyers, so, we could drive a Mack truck through any argument that's presented or any
Right.
factual scenario and pick it apart and stuff. But there were enough things that she kind of just randomly said, and I never met her before, we never spoken. I signed up for the session on a little link, paid my money, and I had to wait 4 months. I mean, she's very busy, this woman. It's not
Yeah.
like, I don't think she's, and it just made me really, and it's actually made me look at things in a softer way, in a way, and look at things from a much more empathetic way, and thinking like, this is not the end. This is only part of the journey.
And to the extent you were saying before, you kind of had a feeling in this life, like, what's the point? Like, why are we here? Did it change that mentality for you and kind of make you feel better about that?
Yeah, completely. Because I always, as like a left brain person, you're like, I want an answer. Like,
Yeah.
what is my destiny? Why am
Yeah.
I here? And now it's like, well, the reason you're here is to kind of absorb all of this and grow and be a positive influence to those around you and kind of reach your potential. And also then it like, things seemed really scary to me. Like, I definitely had a very much like if whatever you try to do, you have to be fabulous at it. Like, don't
Well,
try to,
I think what's great about what you said was how it was so comforting. What you learned was so comforting, not just about your dad, but your own life. We're gonna have to have a part two. Like, we'll give it a few months, but
see what
I'm
I've
gonna
done with
wrap
my
this up
life.
in a minute because I could talk to you for another hour or two about this, but we're gonna definitely do a part two. Um, but the thing I wanted to say here before we close is, I just I have seen, I've spoken to Jessica many times. I've referred several people to her. Uh, I think, like, you first texted me like, "Oh my God, she's the real deal," I think is what you said in your text.
She is the real deal.
And
She is the real deal.
I just feel like, oh my God, like, I lived my whole life. I'm 62 years old now, and I'm just learning about spiritual mediums. I'm just learning about Jessica. I'm just learning about my path and purpose. I right now today feel more invigorated, alive, passionate, excited than I ever have in my life. And I just want everybody to get the opportunity to tap into this, because what Jessica will say is, we're all intuitive. We all can
Yes,
tap into, like, we all can kind of do what she did if you practice it. Um, and I just feel like everybody out there can improve their life in some way if they can tap into this. And so that's why I started the Connect podcast. Kind of my purpose and path and mission was to educate, inspire, motivate. And so I so appreciate you coming on here, sharing a very personal story about your session and, with Jessica. And the reason I wanted to do it was I just think your story is so compelling because you went into it, you know, not necessarily sure what to think, maybe a little bit of a skeptic at times. And it had such a powerful impact on you. The part about your dad is just unbelievable. And so I really am still kind of digesting what this all means in terms of the big picture, but it's a game changer for sure, for sure. And so
absolutely.
is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this one up?
It's like, there are this world we live in so full of of bad things. Like, there are active con artists and all that. But I think, like, I would say to everybody, give yourself a chance. Like, nothing is black and white anymore in this world. I mean, I think, like Stephen Hawking said, You know, everything we believe now will be disproved 100 years from now, right? And that's scientifically proven, right? So the world is not only what we can see.
Amen, because that's what really is clear to me. And like what makes complete sense to me is I fully believe I don't know everything. There's a lot I don't know. My brain is this amazing computer that I've only tapped into a portion of it.
Right,
Your
exactly.
thoughts and the power of your mind can do things we are still learning. And so I'm just excited to learn more, to get better at it, to tap into my spirit guide more, into my intuition. I feel like I just can't wait to continue on this journey. So we are going to come back again. Will you come back again? We'll give it a little time to breathe, but we'll come back and continue this
Absolutely.
conversation.
I hope I have something to report.
Yeah, no, you will. You definitely will. Well, that's this episode of Connect. If you enjoyed it, please share it with friends, family, talk about it, spread the word. We'll be back with another session soon, and you haven't heard the last of Jayne Fan. I can't wait to continue our conversation real soon.
Well, really, thank you for having me, Andy. Well, thank you for introducing me to Jessica, first of all.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you did it. To be continued.
Right. Yes. Okay.